Hi, Nick Park here again from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and I'm here to remind you that it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming. Well, in-person services were stopped in churches because of the coronavirus, and all of a sudden every pastor became a TV evangelist. And some of us had to learn technology, more technology than we ever wanted to learn in a lifetime, and suddenly we had to learn it all in a very short space of time. But now we're looking at in-person services resuming once more. They're going to look a little bit different because of physical distancing and the public health requirements and everything else. But are we going back to normal? What about your new congregation? I want to have a word with church leaders first, and then I want to speak to church members. For church leaders, many of us suddenly discovered a congregation that we didn't know we had. People following us online. People some of whom would rarely, if ever, darken the doors of our churches. Some of them living in different countries. And yet they became part of our worshipping community. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to just leave that new congregation behind? How can you keep that new congregation? One of the challenges will be to work out how to bring people that have been watching online to meeting with us in in-person services. Some of them won't. And we may really need to consider for a while doing both online services and in-person services. I know that's going to create workload. As a pastor, I understand that all too well. But we do want to reach as many people as possible with the gospel. But also, we need to ask our old congregation, maybe that's a bad terminology, but by that I mean the people that were worshipping with us in service before we had our services suspended, physical services suspended. We should be asking them, what is it that they are missing most during this period of online services? Some things are working quite well, but what are the things that they are really missing most? And I think we will find that the biggest answer of all is community. Now I want to really widen this out, and I'm talking not just to pastors, but also to church members. And I want you to think about this whole idea of community. Because community is, or koinonia, as the Bible calls it, and it's variously translated as community, as fellowship, as communion. This community, this koinonia, is a central part of what the church is, and it's what many of us have been missing most whenever we haven't been able to have physical in-person services. Years ago, it used to be that evangelical churches in Ireland would stand up and either on the street or in some kind of evangelistic setting would proclaim the gospel message so that people would believe. And then those people, once they believed, we would try to get them to start attending church so we could disciple them, and they'd begin to make friends and get to know people. And gradually, sometime after they had believed, they began to feel as if they belonged. But believing came before belonging. Now, actually, in a lot of churches, including the church I lead, we're seeing that for quite a number of years now, that process has been reversed. That people often come to the church before they really believe anything about the gospel. But they come because they know somebody and they like the sense of community. They just like the way it feels. And gradually, as they hear the word, as they keep attending, then they begin to believe. But they actually belong first before they believe. So we've gone from being a church where people used to believe and then belong to a church where people now tend to belong first and then believe. And of course, one of the reasons for this is that the church provides a sense of community that is sadly lacking in contemporary society. Starbucks, the CEO of Starbucks, former CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, he once said that Starbucks' main commodity was not coffee, but was community. Because people needed a space, a place that was not work, that was not home, but somewhere else where they felt they belonged. And they found that in a coffee shop. But you know what? The church can do that far better than Starbucks, because we've been doing it for 2,000 years. And when we do it right, we do it better than anybody else on earth. So community is going to be one of the huge things that people are coming back to church for. I know that's one of the things I have really missed during these last few months. And in order for us to do community well in the new normal of after the lockdown and as we begin to meet in person again, there's several things that we need to do. First of all, we need to appreciate each other more. I don't know about you, but I've discovered that being physically separated from my brothers and sisters in Christ has made me appreciate them more. Has made me realize what they have to offer to our fellowship, and when I don't get a chance to see them, it's missing from my life. I would really encourage us as we begin to meet again, tell people that you've missed them, appreciate them, and express that appreciation. That's going to help everybody experience a renewed feeling of community and fellowship once more. But also we've got to be patient with each other. You know, it's important at this time that people do not feel pressurized in going at a pace that they're not ready for. In other words, not everybody's going to be ready to rush back into church on the first Sunday. I mean, I can't wait. You know, Sunday the 5th of July, I'll be there hours before the service starts. Not everybody will. You know, not everybody's going to rush back. Some people aren't going to feel ready. They're going to feel nervous. They're going into a crowd of people again. It might take time. And it's important that we give people space to feel that way and don't pressurize them to be there. Also, with doing things like wearing masks, we don't think masks are going to be compulsory. So masks will probably be optional. We still don't know what the government will spring on us at the last minute, but we're assuming masks will be optional. But if somebody wants to wear a mask, that's fine. They shouldn't feel put down by others because they're wearing a mask. And neither should anybody who's not wearing a mask feel put down by others. We need to be patient with one another, because patience with each other has been a casualty in recent months. I've seen Christians getting increasingly angry at those that take a different view, for example, as to how slow or how fast the country should emerge from lockdown and how slow or how fast churches should move. People have taken different views on this. And sometimes they've got quite nasty with the people who take a different view and call them names. Years ago, in the very early days of the Christian church, there was a controversy called the Donatist controversy, and it was about how churches had reacted under persecution. What the Roman authorities had done, they'd said to church leaders to order them to hand over some Christian books to the persecutors. They felt that this would mean these people had renounced their faith in Christ. And some churches said, no, we're not handing anything over. There were other churches that said, well, we've actually got some books here that are pretty useless and pretty heretical, so we'll hand them over, it'll get the persecutors off our back, and we'll still keep worshipping Jesus. And what happened was, after the persecution had ended, there was enmity between those two groups of Christians. And it continued for a long time. In fact, it was still going on over 150 years later in the time of Augustine. And in fact, it ended up causing physical violence. There were actually wars and crusades carried out against the Donatists. So one group fighting against the other and denying that the others were truly Christians. It caused real problems in the church for hundreds of years. All because people could not have patience with each other or forgive one another for taking a different approach at a time of trial. It would be an absolute tragedy if in the Christian church, those that maybe felt they were being more considerate for public health had bitterness or anger to those who wanted to push more quickly into having services. It would be dreadful if those who wanted to push more quickly into having services began putting accusations and holding grudges against those who took a more cautious approach. I see this happening in our society. I've seen it happening in the church in the United States. I've seen it happening within the Catholic Church here in Ireland. I'm praying that we do not give room for that as evangelicals, but we would treasure our fellowship, treasure our unity, and be patient with one another. Why? Because it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming, and we want that Sunday to be a glorious Sunday, and we want there to be a succession of glorious Sundays for the Christian church. And for that to happen, we've truly got to re-establish and re-experience our sense of community. And however we're going to do church in this new normal, we've got to give space for genuine community as the church. God bless you, and please join us again next Friday for It's Friday, but Sunday's coming.